So we are ready for chapter 26, and we've been talking about the tabernacle and the items within it. Any questions about what we discussed last week? We actually made it through a whole chapter. That was good for us. Nobody got anything? Then we'll hop in. My first paragraph is 1 through 6. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen and blue and purple and scarlet yarns. You shall make them with cherubim skillfully worked into them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains shall be the same size. 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and the other 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another. And you shall make loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain in the first set. Likewise, you shall make loops on the edge of the outermost curtain on the second set. 50 loops you shall make on the one curtain, and 50 loops you shall make on the edge of the other curtain. That is the second set. The loops shall be opposite one another, and you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and couple the curtains one to another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle may be a single whole. What are you thinking? I'm thinking immediately the seamstress. So
I was thinking like, how fantastic they must have looked to entwine cherubs in the fabric. I did a little research on linen, that you can make with linen, and my thought was that came back was when I was asking Gary today, that linen to process from flaxseed takes 6 months. So if it takes 6 months from the beginning to grow it to the process of using having this fine thread of linen to weave, it was 6 months. So where the Israelites people, they were moving because this is all supposed to be carried by rings.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, did flaxseed grow wild wherever they were going? So did they just pick it as they were moving, or did they stay a year in one place or something?
So linen was one of the primary fabrics of the day. So other than skins, fur, most people, especially in Egypt, would have had linen clothing. And so some of this is probably what they plundered from Egypt as they left. The other side of it is they probably were still processing it as they went. You know, that's the other thing we don't often think about is there's still the everyday tasks. Even though you're moving your herds, you're moving your family, you still have the task of feeding the herds and caring for them and, you know, setting up camp and breaking camp, and, washing dishes and taking care of clothes and all of that. So I would assume they were still doing that as they went along.
So this is a question.
Okay.
Because God probably knew where they got from when they left.
Fair assumption.
Do you think he was modeling all of this to actually take a certain portion of what they got from them to see how willing they were to give it up for that? You know, like he said, okay, I know they got this much, I'm gonna only ask for this much and see if they'll
Wouldn't it be ironic if everything he asks for the tabernacle was only a 10 of what they actually got? Yeah.
I mean, because he's very specific.
Very specific.
And it just seems odd, again.
Oddly specific.
Because before it was not about riches and not about, but now it's specifically about certain things. So did he know what they had and was only asking for?
I've never thought of it that way, but no.
I mean, it almost would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to stand to reason with the way we've seen God work, right? I mean, he rarely asks for more than what we actually can provide, and rarely does he ask for more than what he won't care for. So, what does that mean for whenever he asks us for things?
We should be willing to get it, because he's only asking for what we can spare.
Even if we don't think we can.
Right.
What you got, Diane? You stuck your hand up, then you.
Yeah, they were shepherds. There would have been excess wool.
The only problem with that is what it takes to process wool.
Well,
I mean, it's the same thing with the linen. They would have had a lot of wool, yes.
well, I get that, but my grandma did it, so I guess if she had wanted me to know, and if I'd have wanted to know, I might be able to process wool. My daughter had sheep in Wisconsin. She sent like 10 bags full of wool back with us to give a woman in Bluffton that is going to process it. And I didn't see the woman. Her mom came and got it, but I just wonder, I mean, Lynn, the other question I have is on verse number 1. It ends with skillful workmen. You think the men are making these linen curtains?
Well, we haven't got there yet.
Oh, it's gonna.
See, mine doesn't say that. Doesn't just says skillfully worked.
But now I want to ask a question. Have you worked with linen before?
Not so much. No,
I've sewn with linen. I mean, my daughter made one.
Is it any harder to work with than a cotton?
Oh, yeah, to iron and
don't make it hot.
yeah. And on your iron, it says cotton, and then it gets hotter to linens. It's not easy, but it's beautiful. Wrinkles easily.
Kind of elegant. But I don't know about all this weaving of cherubs into that fabric and just see.
So you just made a comment.
What's that?
You made a comment, and I think you're making it offhanded, and I don't think you, but if you said it's more elegant.
Yeah.
Linen is more elegant than.
That's what you put on your tables with those tablecloths, you know, your table is the Christmas and you're celebrating and those are linens.
So,
your bed.
So to answer your question, I think that's the answer. The wool would have been available and they could have made it out of wool, but they made it out of linen because linen is more elegant. Amy, Paul got his tent making abilities from someplace, hands down, absolutely. Linen is far better to wear in the heat, which means in the desert, it probably would have been far more breathable too. And if you're making a tent out of linen, I don't think I'd want to have a tent out of wool. Come to think of it, that just, oof.
I don't think that tents were made from linen, only the curtains of the tents were covered with ram skins dyed red. That's fur.
We're not there. Yes, Jim.
Going back to the previous instructions for all this, how was this communicated to them?
So we haven't actually got to how this is communicated yet. What we do know is this is being told to Moses and Joshua who are up on the mountain. Now, my personal opinion is it happened probably a lot like John got his revelation in the book of Revelation, that God just digital download right into his brain. He got the whole vision of the whole thing, and here's the measurements, and then he's like, oh, okay, well, we got to write this thing down because I got to remember all that. That's a lot to take in because that seems to be the way that God likes to do things. He just gives you a vision for it. But we haven't been told yet how it's being communicated. We're simply saying, this is what God is saying you shall do. Anything else? No one wants to ask the question about verse 1, colors?
I just thought that was royalty.
So, interestingly enough, none of these three colors at this point in time in human history had anything to do with royalty. Scarlet, blue, and purple were not royal colors. Scarlet was the color for birth and new life. The color, of course, is of blood, and that's why they thought about life. So when they would look upon this tabernacle, they would see that and then think about that this is a place where they can get new life. Even the notion of a new birth would not be foreign to them, though for some odd reason, by the time we get to the New Testament, that's a new concept, but it wouldn't have been to these people. Purple, we tend to think of it being a royal color because it tends to be linked to the feudal system of lords and ladies. But originally, a lord was the person who secured the goods, and a lady was the one who distributed the goods. So if this was a community, the lord would be the town manager who would gather in all the resources of the community, and his wife, the lady, would be the one who purveyed and made sure that everybody had what they needed. In general, it was the color for merchants. Think more along the lines of the old general store operator than it was about royalty. But as you moved into the feudal system, lords and ladies began to be part of the hierarchy, and they got elevated, and so that color purple got elevated with it to kingly, princely kind of things. So there's a sense then too, when they see the purple on the curtains, that this is a place where they can come and get the resources that they need. And the last color, blue, was meant to be the color for purity, hope, and holiness. This was the color of the priesthood. And so when you weave those three concepts together, the temple, the tabernacle, was meant to be the place where people could come and be made right with the holiness of God and receive God's provision. Now, gold always has been a color with royalty. So when you add the gold in, that's the only part that's royal, but the regular colors actually had more to do with what God wanted to accomplish in the tabernacle than just looking up.
So is that why, like when you see depictions of Mary, is that why she's typically in blue?
Yep, that's exactly why Jesus and Mary are often in blues. The other interesting thing, while we haven't got there yet, we know that there's going to be the food laws, right? The kosher laws. And Jewish people are not allowed to eat shellfish. But they were, while they couldn't eat it, they were not opposed to processing it. And so purple dyes in particular were manufactured in the Canaanite region. In fact, Canaanite means purple. Canaan means purple. And they were known for having taken these seafood, these crustaceans, and processing them to make a purple dye.
Well, that was another thing I thought of as far as the colors would be something readily available.
So on the one hand, yeah, you wouldn't think of purple as being readily available, but yet if they were, there's a lot of access to the ocean and they could have gotten these shells and things like that to process, then yes. You tend to want to think of, greens and browns and that kind of stuff, but yet there's far more colors out there than what we think about readily accessible. You just have to go to different places to find them.
Isn't there in the New Testament, was it Lydia that was a woman of purple?
Lydia was a purveyor of fine purple cloth. Yes. Yep. And so, yeah, and again, it was a merchant thing. So Lydia in particular, she sold the purple cloth to all of the wealthy merchants. So when you're the supplier of the wealthy, guess what? You become wealthy. Anything else you notice?
I couldn't get it, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I couldn't get it in my head when it said the loops are the loops are on the end, parallel to each other. When I think of the loops for a curtain, they're at the top, like you can hang your curtains. Why the loops? I know they're gonna be putting them together, right? So you got this loop on this side and this loop on this side. So
we don't have all the information yet, but I get the picture if I'm thinking ahead enough that you have your pole and you have the curtain on this side and a curtain on this side, right? I think the loops go like that to hook fasten them to the poles.
oh, right.
And then they have the poles this way with clasps that would clamp on to hang them.
But it said that the loops were joined together with gold clasps.
And the loops were joined together with gold clasps.
It
So
said,
then
you
I've
shall
got,
make 50 loops on one curtain and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain. That was the second step. The loop shall be opposite, and you shall make 50 clasps of gold and join the curtains to one another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle may be one. So it's like they're joining them with gold clasps.
so then, yeah, I guess it is more like what you're thinking then, where the loops are to hang it and then the clasps are to hook it together.
Like a chip clip.
Yeah, chip clip. Before they're chips. But this is still a very ornate thing. Anything else you notice? Next paragraph. 7 through 10. You shall also make a curtain of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. 11 curtains shall you make. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of each cubit 4 cubits. The 11 curtains shall be the same size. You shall couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves. And the 6th curtain you shall double over in front of the tent. You shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the other curtain that is on the other outermost. Okay. Now, most of you guys probably have seen diagrams, right, of what the tabernacle looked like. So you would have had the outer court would look something like this. Made that not wide enough. And so these are the curtains that we in the paragraph before. And then on this one, it'd be like that.
It says out of goat hair, not goat skin. Am I reading that right?
That's what it says. I've never worked with goat hair, but I don't think it's all that fun.
You have to weave it?
It would be a woven, yes.
You like do a rabbit fur then.
Well,
There's some long-haired goats. So around here, we think of short-haired goats, but there are long-haired goats.
There are long-haired goats. But now I'm curious. This is verse 7 kind of uses that. Six. Yep, it's goat hair, so we're talking more like, yeah, like Melissa was saying, like when they use rabbit fur and
that's
weave.
still on the skin, isn't it?
No, that you could actually, what is that?
Angora.
Angora fur. They turn it into a yarn of sorts, and it's really fine and soft.
Okay.
So you can still do that even, but I didn't.
You just kind of spin it, kind of take a bunch of it and just kind of spin it like you do wool and just kind of things it all together.
But it's just a different thickness than wool is.
And that's what Laura used on her ring when you were
Oh, yeah.
dating.
Yeah.
It was too big.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
No. You're right, Tony. That's Angora.
Yeah.
Would the goat hair also be waterproof?
Well, goat hair probably would be more waterproof, absolutely. The linen is more breathable, but this one is meant to be more waterproof. Absolutely.
I'm having a little problem. What's the significance of the 50?
He said, if you didn't hear, he says he's having a problem. What's the significance of 50? I think it has more to do with spacing and the pragmatics of it to distribute the weight evenly. Because we've not really done the measurements on how big they are. Does anybody's translation not use cubits?
Yeah, ours had feet on the first one.
Okay, so how big are the curtains?
The first curtains were 42 feet and 6 feet wide.
42 by 6. Okay, and the second set of curtains were the goat hair ones.
45 feet by 6.
So if you're putting 50 loops on 42 feet, that's not going to allow a whole lot of stress on any one part. Wouldn't you say?
Most of them closer together, but
Yeah, wouldn't have caused it to want to pull apart as much. Okay, now I want to do the math. 42 times 12 divided by 50. That's about every 10 inches. They're putting a loop about every 10 inches. And on this one, 5 times 20, it's about 10.8 inches. Now again, if you've got this one out here that's blocking a lot of the wind, then you wouldn't have nearly as much stress on the inner curtain, would you? So I don't know that there's any significance to the number 50 per curtain, but as I think about just pragmatically, that makes it, I mean, whenever we've got our curtains closed at home, the grommets are probably about 10 inches apart. Pretty close to that. I wouldn't have thought of that.
You know, it could be too that by having enough of those rings that in the strong breeze, they're not whipping around. like they would be if they didn't have their loop up.
Right, and that's what I think too, is it's to keep it from feeling the stress of the winds. Good question. Because I 50 as a number doesn't really have a lot of biblical significance that I can think of.
I thought it would just be.
Just, no, good question.
Is it just a square footage it would take to cover the area that you're looking at?
I would say it probably is, yes. I'm certain that that's a big part of it. This is what it would take to cover the footage of the size that God wants. And then he's pragmatically given them the distance so that they only have to make this thing once. Okay, Chris, you're making a...
I was just looking at a diagram and it says it's 40 feet. The entire tent was 40 feet, 45 feet long by 15 feet wide and 15 feet high.
In the middle?
No, they're showing it as flat on top and then coming down. So the four, it was flat on top and then it came down on the side.
So the sides, these curtains along the sides are only 6 foot high, but yet the whole thing is 15 foot high. So you can almost see in.
That says the entire tent was 40 feet long, 45 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 15 feet high.
So there was actually no roof, linen.
No, there was a roof across the top, but
Yeah,
there
it
is.
says it was covered by four layers of cloth and skin.
We haven't got to the top yet. We haven't got to the cup.
The top and the sides of the actual tent are all the same.
So that's
Like it
45
goes
feet.
over and then it comes down.
15 high, 15 across, and 15 down, and be 45 feet that way too.
So then maybe these are going this way.
Yeah. Yeah, every 6 foot.
Every 6 foot.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So that would make sense.
Is this the entertainment area?
It's split into
So
different.
if it's 45.
Let me come back to that, Terry. Because you're hopping it. You've had some great ideas the last 2 weeks, and we're almost there. Almost there. You're actually pulling a Jim.
Yeah.
Jim wasn't here last week, and you were doing. He said last week it sounded like this thing's an RV. At first, I was wanting to poo-poo that idea and say, I tend to think of RVs as being. We just watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That's not an RV anybody wants. But then I got thinking, we're here with Rev, and they make $1.7 million RVs. And those are very nice. So, and no loops on the top, right? I think now that you said that, I really think that they go this way. These go this way, and
Didn't she say that there was 3 layers?
3 layers of skin.
3 layers of, no, this is 4 layers of cloth and skin.
Well, let's read the next paragraph. Because I guess we probably should have just read the whole thing. And then
Well, yeah.
11 through 14. You shall make 50 clasps of bronze and put the clasps into the loops and couple the tent together that it may be a single whole. And the part that remains of the curtain of the tent, the half curtain that remains, shall hang over the back of the tabernacle, and the extra that remains in the length of the curtain, the cubit on the side and the cubit on the other side, shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle, on this side and that, to cover it. And you shall make for the tent a covering of tan ram skin and a covering of goat skins on top. Oh, we get to this one.
This mine says, make for the tent a covering of ram skins dyed red, and over that a covering of hides of sea cow.
Yeah, that's why I knew. Oh, we're at that verse.
This says manatee.
So yours says manatee, hers says sea cow. What's yours say? Porpoise. Porpoise.
Mine says badger.
And his says badger.
It must be a Hebrew word that gets translated many ways.
So
Rare, is it a rare skin? That's possibly.
So this word is not fully known. When they make the notion of badger, it's translated badger the rest of the way through. What is very clear is this would be a waterproof skin.
Or a beaver.
The thing that concerns me is a badger is not a kosher animal, nor is it a very big animal. So to get skins off of a badger, it's going to take a lot of badger skins.
I don't know what I in the desert.
What?
Are they in the desert?
They are also in the desert, yes. I mean, remember, we're over here in
It's not a natural habitat for a badger.
So some scholars claim that this is a species of antelope that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, they tore it all up for the tabernacle.
They think
Some scholars go with the manatee or dudong, which is a cousin of it that's in this region, or even dolphin skins. We don't actually know what it is. Sea cow makes me think of a hippo, which, I mean, they would have hippos all over the place along the Nile River, and you could easily get those, and they would absolutely be waterproof skins. They'd be big. But and even manatees or the dugongs, you shook your head immediately. So you know the animal I'm talking about? It looks kind of like a manatee, but it's got a longer nose. But either of those creatures would also be big animals with a larger skin. We don't actually know what this word is saying. The badger thing has stuck around for a long time, but when you start thinking about it, it just doesn't make sense. I asked Daniel, and he's supposed to be chasing this one because he had never paid attention to this word before. I guess it's one of those things he glossed over. I've known about this word for a long time. I've asked all kinds of people, what is a sea cow? Because that was the first time I read it. That's what my Bible called it, was a sea cow. And I'm wondering if it maybe is a transliterated word where they're saying a word from like Egyptian or something like that and just bringing it directly into Hebrew. And then as the Hebrew scholars are trying to figure out what this word is like, we don't know what that means.
I asked about manatee relatives. You mentioned that. It says 3 relatives are an elephant, an aardvark, and a small gopher-like. Is it hyrax? Hyrax. But it uses gopher-like. Not badger.
Not badger, but that would be closer to. Because, okay, so I will pull a Jim. I'm going to step forward. They are very clearly delineated between clean and unclean animals, right? We haven't got there yet. but you all understand that as a principle. Clean animals were animals that chewed the cud and had a split hoof. So sheep are clean, goats are clean, cows are clean. But you couldn't eat a horse because a horse doesn't have a hoof. Most of the antelope species were clean. But they said you can't, you could eat a rabbit even though it doesn't have a cloven hoof. But it's because it fits a different category. It also says, do not eat anything that eats other animals. So for me, that automatically would rule out a badger of any kind, because they're omnivores. They'll eat other animals, they'll eat bugs, they'll eat berries, they'll eat roots. They're not supposed to eat lions or bears or other carnivores. So if they're not supposed to eat it, then, and touching those animals that have eaten other animals makes them unclean, then they wouldn't want to process them for their tabernacle. At least that's my thinking. By the same token, if we switch over to aquatic animals, the fish that they could eat had to have scales. So they're not going to eat manatees because
Mammal anyway.
they're a mammal. What?
Well, I was looking up sea cows and it says how big a sea cow hide is. It says the length of a sea cow's hide is about 144 cubits, almost the same width as a football field.
So now that almost makes me think we're talking something more like a whale.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A porpoise is huge.
Not near that big.
Not that big.
And it doesn't have scales.
So the thing of it is the scholar who says this is probably some species that is now extinct. That's a nice, convenient answer.
It still
No one can
says,
disprove.
says sea cows are still plentiful today and are an excellent source of hides.
Huh.
And see if I look up Encyclopedia Britannica, it says sea cows, extinct mammal.
They call it an extinct mammal.
Huh. Well, who knows when this was broke?
Now.
Encyclopedias are obsolete.
So what you're saying is whatever they made it with, they weren't gonna waste the animal. If they had to get the hide off of it, they were going to utilize the entire.
That's my thought. I mean, God has been very cautious about everything up to this point, right? I mean, he doesn't want them to waste anything. And the things that even, we haven't gotten to the offerings yet, but whenever he says to give something over to him, like the fat, the kidneys, the liver, those kind of things, he asks for those things on purpose. So I'm guessing that whatever animals skins they've used, it's something that they would be able to use the rest of it. They're not just going to go game hunting, kill this animal, skin it, and then throw out the carcass for, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that just doesn't seem like how God
Retains the bank.
What?
It retains the bank.
Right. So I'm guessing it's something they have to be able to use. So it makes the most sense to think that this is probably some kind of clean aquatic animal that they can eat the meat of it, and we just don't have it anymore.
This says sea cows and manatees are the same thing.
So, and it could be that it was a species of manatee that's gone. But I guess I would not have thought of manatees as being a clean animal because they don't fit the descriptors, but maybe they do.
Or if it's extinct, maybe there was a variety that did.
Maybe there was a variety that did and it's now gone. But the big thing is, one, this is one of those points where we're 3,000 years removed Actually, we're 3,500 years removed, and we're not quite sure. But what we do know is it was something that they would have had access to, and it's something that would have made this waterproof. Beyond that, I'll tell you, the sea cow question is going to be in my top 50 when I get there. Because it's plagued. Melissa and I have had this conversation for 15 years. And I've never gotten a single professor to ever give me a good answer. So I made it through at least this far that first time. I got into Deuteronomy before I finally gave up the first time trying to read through the Bible.
This says that they are extinct. The manatees are like a descendant of them, but it's not the same thing. But it says here that they have bark-like skin. And it was dark brown, sometimes streaked or spotted. They had no teeth, and it said their meat was really tasty.
There you go.
I've seen manatees in Florida.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were 30 feet long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it says.
So these are a big creature. So yeah, your thing about the size can be stretched to a football.
This is the map that has,
And they weigh 10 pounds.
5 different ones, and it says the, Dugong, D-U-G-O-N-G, was the Nile all the way down the west side of Africa.
So that one is still there. I know about that. And manatees, of course, are here in the Americas. But apparently there's a big.
They were in the Bering Sea, Commodore Islands and the Bering Sea. And they were wiped out by hunters in the 18th century.
Huh, there you go. So I hadn't had a good answer, but there you go. That's about as close as we're gonna get.
You didn't in college, you just needed to come to Decatur.
That's right. College didn't get it, seminary didn't get it, had to come here and listen to Wikipedia. Or no, Encyclopedia Britannica.
Put 5 different websites together and get an answer.
Well, and so this goes to show that there are some pieces of this that have been lost. Now, what that tells me is we should do a better job of telling our story. Because if we don't share the story, it will get lost. It can get lost. Now, God has kept all the most important pieces of it. Absolutely. Does it really matter what this animal is? Probably not. But as we've been digging into it, there's things about what this animal really should be because of that consistency piece that we've talked about. God's.
But it also shows the bigger picture, I guess, of God, and as things have evolved, so is his plan. Like, you know, he's always provided the people with what they need for the time they're living in.
Absolutely. God always gives us exactly what we need. And that kind of goes back to, Chris, your thoughts about, you know, how much of this did God know exactly what they had? He can take just enough to do what he needs and provides them with everything else that they need.
I have a question.
Sure.
Going back to the ram skins dyed red. Were those skins then the around the Holy of Holies and the red, they were red dye because of the forewarning of Jesus dying on the cross, the blood of Christ?
More than likely, yes. Good catch. Because again, that red scarlet color was for new birth, new life. And so, yeah, for the tabernacle, this curtain for the Holy of Holies would be red. Anything else? What do you think about, and I hadn't even given this any thought until just now. It keeps saying we have these pieces and then put it together to make a whole. It keeps saying that you've got to have it be one piece. Any thoughts?
Well, if you're making a dress, you can't leave the one sleeve out. You'd be right. So.
Okay, yeah. I couldn't help but hear Paul using this to talk about the body of Christ and how we're all members of it, and that you can't have one part without the rest. Is that stretching it too far?
No, I like it.
It's just it's using seamstress and tent making terminology instead of human anatomy.
Yeah, I took it very similar to that. Just this makes it one tabernacle that they're making, not various rooms or anything else. It's
one piece. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Would make it easier to move.
Well, yeah, coming in parts would make it a whole lot easier to move, because I can't imagine a 42x6 is going to be light, or a 45x6, or that stinking sea cow hide that's. Who wants to be the guys who are put in charge of the sea cow hide?
How wide is the football field?
It's
on the side of the sea.
150 feet by 450 feet.
It's 300 or 100 yards, so it's 300 feet long.
300, yeah, but then you got the end zones.
Well, yeah.
360 feet by 150 feet.
I'm just trying to think how wide. It said that the sea cow is.
Knowing that, it'd probably only take one.
That's what I'm wondering.
But that thing would still weigh.
Yeah, oh yeah. Huge.
And of course, God's going to give provisions here in a little bit about who's in charge of what. That may be in Leviticus. That might be in Leviticus, but still, he has provisions for every little. Keep going. 15. That goes on the next page. 15 through 25. That's a long section. You shall make upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia. 10 cubits shall be the length of a frame, and 1.5 cubits the breadth of each frame. There shall be 2 tenons in each frame for fitting together. So you shall do for all the frames of the tabernacle. You shall make the frames for the tabernacle, 20 frames for the south side, and 40 bases of silver. You shall make under the 20 frames. 2 bases under one frame for its 2 tenons, and the 2 bases under the next frame for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle on the north side, 20 frames, and there 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under the next frame. And for the rear of the tabernacle, westward, you shall make 6 frames. And you shall make 2 frames for the corners of the tabernacle in the rear. They shall be separate beneath, but joined at the top at the first ring. Thus shall it be with both of them. They shall form the 2 corners, and there shall be 8 frames with their bases of silver, 16 bases, 2 bases under one frame and 2 bases under another. My carpenter brain is not processing what these frames look like.
You read it. Mine says sockets, and you read
Sockets?
Yeah.
What do you?
I think it's maybe something to set the pole into.
So in here, it looks like frames.
Yeah, I would try. Okay.
It's like the frame of a house, like the 2x4s that are put together before the outside and inside. It's
So,
like a frame.
so there'd be, or how many did it say on the side?
20
Depends on the size.
frames for the south side.
20 for the north, so, that would be what, every 2.5 feet?
Probably.
Something like that.
16 inches. Right?
Which is interesting because Dad says most of the time whenever he's framing a house, he does 2-foot center.
2 foot, I thought it was 16 inches.
16, most generally.
16.
16.
Unless you get a 2x6 and then they go.
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. Is it 2-foot exterior walls?
Mhm.
And then 16 interior? I don't remember. I'm a carpenter's son. There's a reason I'm a carpenter's son.
You can't go to 24 outside, 16 on the inside.
But he always uses 2x6s on the outside.
Right.
Be 27 inches.
27 inches, which that's,
If you take 45 feet divided by 20.
see, there you go.
You read basis, so that means what they're put into.
So they would have something, some kind of base that this frame would sit down into.
Call it an axle.
An axle? He's still sitting on this motorhome like.
Well, keep them from working in the sand with wind and stuff.
Well, and so we don't, we're not talking about 2x4s or 2x6s, so it would be probably 2 acacia poles with some kind of bracing, putting them together.
Yeah, I think it shows, like, this must be like fit into these are the
Yeah.
bottom.
Yeah, those are those bases.
Well, in chapter, in verse 16, it says,
What does the wood look like?
the length of the board is 10 cubits.
It's little.
Each board is 1.5 cubits.
Yeah, it just looks right.
Wide.
That's a. See, I'm thinking that maybe we've got 1.5 cubits wide this way, because acacia wood doesn't grow very. Melissa, can you pull up acacia trees?
Some of them look pretty big.
Some of them do.
Maybe back then.
Maybe back then.
Strengthens.
And the other thing, they don't have sawmills, it have to be rough.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I don't know that.
ACACIA. ACACIA. Yeah, right, and then it's
Asia wood, Asia trees.
and then make sure.
It's kind of like a desert looking tree then.
Yeah, are you sharing your screen with them? But that, I mean, well, I guess.
Does it say how tall they get?
How big do they get? It's a fern-like feathery leaves. Well, that one right there looks pretty straight. I knew they were, they're
There's different
resins.
varieties of acacia.
It's rich in whatever it is, tannin, which is used for tanning
Right.
and dyes.
It has a few species produce valuable timber,
There you go. Oh, okay.
the yarn.
Acacia has a gummy substance as well.
That's what I said.
I'm not for sure if acacia is what they get myrrh from. But there you go. Okay. I guess it could get thick. You could get thick boards out of it, But man, the lumber yard you'd have to make this thing would still be pretty substantial.
That's basically like what you would imagine when you see after.
3 stories, it's 3 stories, right?
Yeah, well, it looks like.
Where is that?
Clear to the right, second one down there, it says 3 stories.
Right,
Second row, clear to the right.
Right here?
Yeah.
why not?
Why
not?
Right there.
To the left.
Say 3 stories.
Oh.
There.
3 stores.
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
It just looks straight. I
But
thought
look
it-
at
But
the
look-
graph.
Yeah, I mean, that one's got
I
a
mean,
giraffe
that's
underneath it.
Yeah, that's right.
So okay, all right, I'm convinced. When I think, I think of this kind of a tree, when I think of acacia, but I think of it being more spindly and gangly, but if they get tall enough for giraffes like that to walk underneath it, then, okay, I'm convinced.
Maybe that's why there's no leaves at the bottom.
Yeah.
So maybe they get a whole lot bigger than what I thought. You tend to think of like a desert tree as being something that wants to stay close to the ground. You don't think of it getting.
It looks like it's got a good canopy of shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too. It looks thick at the top.
Okay. My curiosity is satisfied. There's a word.
I sure YaHWeH.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, they could have gotten some pretty big timber out of it. All right, any other thoughts? Makes it easier to think about last week when we were talking about those long poles of acacia wood. I was like, I don't think that they get that straight, but I guess, yeah.
Well, in verse 17, it says they're fit together, so maybe they're not one wide, maybe they're tongue and groove in.
Could be.
That's something that kind of indicates that, but they use that word.
Well, one thing's for certain, this thing seems like it's going to be extremely structurally sound.
You got the A, you can put the A in there.
There you go.
There we go. Remove this from that one.
Go the one to the right,
Yeah, go.
that one right there. Yeah, see, there you go. You can start to kind of see that over here.
Hang on, make sure.
Or even had a fence around it.
Like it's over.
Electric, there's electricity there too.
Well,
This one, I don't know.
yeah, that one there is probably closer to what it looks like, but it's not the colors. I think that's the one that you're looking at.
Yeah, that one.
I don't know if you can.
And that has the dimensions and everything too. And it says what the different sections.
It's a foot and a half. It's about a foot and a half off the ground.
Well, if that thing's 15 foot tall, then I'm afraid of that priest because he's pretty massive.
But he said not above.
Go back to that other picture here. This one right over here. See the priest down front? Right there.
Oh, there.
If it's 15 foot tall, he's probably about 8 foot.
Nah, he's about
6
six.
feet.
A little over 6.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Maybe or not. It just didn't quite look to scale to me. I was thinking.
Well, it is the days with the Goliaths.
I was gonna say, they got traveled with all that stuff, they gotta be some burly people.
You had to have some big guys. I mean, who wants to be the one who has to, link all the links up there at the top of the 15 foot?
Well, it looks like they kind of need to put this on.
Okay.
In the 3 different translations I had here, they talk about putting those boards together. One says each with 2 projections set parallel. The other one says 2 pegs under each frame. And the next one says.
I don't know if, I've been told that, I'm not for sure if that one right there is going to be one that we will go to or not while we're over there, but.
2 tenons shall be in there, so each one's a different.
So it could be that these bases have some kind of a spike in them to kind of secure
The whole thing together.
Ours, mine says pegs.
A peg makes you think more.
Yeah.
Next paragraph. Oh, sorry. You got
Wow.
21 minutes. We'll finish the chapter. 26 through 30. You shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the frames of the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the side of the tabernacle at the rear westward. The middle bar halfway up the frames shall run from end to end. You shall overlay the frames with gold, and shall make their rings of gold for holders for the bars. And you shall overlay the bars with gold. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountain. So again, it has those 5 bars all the way across, around to kind of hold it together.
Those the overlay with gold is also protected from the weather.
I would say so, yeah. On the one hand, it continues with this theme of looking really good. And on the other hand, I think it would protect it from the weather and from insects and things like that.
But they were supposed to have been able to move this.
Absolutely. Very clearly, RV. We're talking Rev RV, not National Lampoon's RV. Anything else you notice in this section? Have you put into notion yet which direction this is always supposed to face? Yes. East, west, and then that makes this north, right? And south. Either right?
Yeah.
Our church is set up right.
Yeah, we're facing the right direction. There you go. What? Well,
If you look at that, looks just right.
it's nice and blonde color.
The entrance is in the east.
Keep going. 31 to 35. And you shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen. It shall be made with cherubim skillfully worked into it. And you shall hang it on the 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, with hooks of gold on the 4 bases of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps and bring the ark of the testimony in there within the veil. And the veil shall separate for you the holy place from the most holy place. You shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And you shall set the table outside the veil and the lampstand on the south side of the tabernacle opposite the table. And you shall put the table on the north side. So our
Reception hall.
that's there, right? And then you, on the north side was the table. And on the south side is our lampstand.
It's the east side.
So what I wanted to build up to, but you already beat me there, is in many ways, this was set up to be almost like what we would call a food truck. That you'd have the food truck here where the food is prepared. And then the people would come and they would sit along the outside and they would eat and they would fellowship together in the presence of God.
Under a big awning.
Under a big awning, protected by the wind with the linen on the outside.
When Jim and I went to a Jewish wedding maybe 10 years ago, and it was in a big tent, but at the front where the sanctuary would be, there was like a 10 by 10 platform that had uprights at four corners, and then they had beautiful screen veils. I mean, it was.
And that's called a huppah, and it's meant to mimic this same principle.
That's what's making me think that.
This was meant to, it was meant to be an inviting place. It was meant to be a place where people would want to come, not where they were afraid to come. When they were afraid to approach God on the mountain, this was meant to draw them in. And the colors and the cherubim and the smells and the sights, the bread, the sacrifices, we say sacrifice, and it was, but I'm serious. It was every time you went to Tabernacle, you're going to a barbecue. And everybody would be sitting around outside and eating, and there was a place for everything.
Where did they start the sweet baby rays at?
Here's something that I was reading it. Just the symbolism of the tabernacle. It says, tabernacle, like the Garden of Eden, is where God dwells, and various details of the tabernacle suggest that it is a mini Eden.
Yes.
These parallels include the east-facing entrance guarded by the cherubim, the gold, the tree of life, which is the lampstand, which looks like a tree, and the tree of knowledge, which is the law. Thus, God's dwelling in the tabernacle was a step toward the restoration of paradise, which is to be completed in the new heaven.
And what was God's promise in Eden? He told them if they trusted him and dwelled with him, he would what? Provide everything that they need. And this is moving back towards that. If you come and dwell with me, if you come to the tabernacle, I will give you life, I will give you restoration, I will give you provision. Come. It was not meant to be something that they were afraid of. It was meant to be something that they enjoyed. Which is probably why Jesus is so upset when he comes into the temple and he finds that they've made it all these extra barriers to keep people from being able to get in. I'm still thinking that maybe we should just start an official barbecue committee and every Sunday have a barbecue after church.
I'll second that motion.
You second that motion?
I'm not cooking.
Hey, Joyce, for the record, if we keep reading, it was the guys who did all the cooking.
Yeah. I know that we got problems.
The cleaning up is what we got problems with.
Well, somebody could use a new smoker.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to getting a new smoker, a little bit bigger one, you know. Got to get that brisket out next week so we have it for Christmas Eve.
That's what we do.
Set beside that hot tub you don't have.
I got a tentative yes on that yesterday morning here. So it hasn't gone officially to the trustees yet, but a friend of ours bought a house down in North Carolina. He's retiring and they're moving down there to be closer to the grandkids. And he was showing us the pictures. We were some of the first people here in Indiana to see the pictures of their house. And they have this sunroom and they're like, Yeah, we've got this wonderful sunroom. The problem is it's got this big monstrosity in the middle that we gotta get rid of. It's just like, you gotta get rid of it. How much do you want for it? They said, if you come get it, it's yours. They're not hot tub people. So we have an excuse to go visit our friends in North Carolina.
Does it fold up so you can put it in the backseat of your car?
We don't know yet.
Don't tell him Christopher, he's gonna volunteer for that.
I think he kind of already has.
I'm thinking you probably just pull it with water in it.
Pull over every now and then.
Yeah,
Hop in.
or he'll just ride in it while we're driving.
But so that kind of notion, even talking about the hot tub thing, this is not what we would think of when we come to church, is it? We've created church as a far more sterile place. Yes, holy, and it should be holy, but this was meant to be. I'm thinking as a kid, whenever my home church is this little bitty church, the whole building would probably fit inside this. When you say dear, and I just remember always being told, don't run in the sanctuary, that kind of stuff, and it was this thing. And on the one hand, yes, it should be a place we treat with respect, reverence, but that's not the picture you get with this tabernacle. On the one hand, yes, treat it with respect, but it was meant to be a place where people gathered and they had fun and they fellowshipped and they.
Well, our reception after services is kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have this tabernacle, and I've read this before, but this really takes me back to childhood, because in St. Mary's there is an altar, and on the altar there is a tabernacle, and the tabernacle is clothed in gold, and this is where the hosts are stored that aren't given at communion that day. So whatever is extra left is stored in the tabernacle. So it takes me back. I don't know if it's good or not, but still it's.
So they're drawing on those ideas for what the church has done, and
So when I see our altar, and there's candles and lampstands and all that all around that altar, so this one looks kind of empty. It looks like it's bare, and it's like
not as empty for this Sunday. You'll have to
see where I'm coming from.
I see where you're coming from. I don't know. My home church was very vibrant growing up, even for a little bitty country church. And I'm not saying that we're not. That's not it at all. So many churches have become, in an attempt to make them holy, they've become sterile. And I don't think that's ever what God wanted. He wanted something vibrant, and fun, and joyful, and life-giving. Even the process of bringing your sacrifice to make atonement. Yes, it was on the one sense solemn, but the interesting thing, when you would bring a sacrifice for atonement, you would give that sacrifice and you wouldn't partake of it. But everybody else in the body who was there that day, they would get to eat of it. And you would eat of someone else's sacrifice. And so there's always this notion that when I do something to make myself right with God, it blesses everyone else. And this was a place that was meant to exemplify that in every detail. It's ornate, yes, but it's highly mobile. It's meant for anyone and everyone to be a part of. It's accessible, yet rich. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job of painting the picture I have in my head, but it's just. Anybody heard of Rudy's who had been in the South? You've heard of them? Rudy's is a barbecue joint, and they got started in Texas, and they're almost always connected to a gas station. Like most of them, I'd say almost
I don't
all of
think
them.
I've ever seen one that's not.
But the first time we went to a Rudy's, it was this gas station, and we stepped out to pump gas, and all of a sudden, no, wait a second, that's not, I don't smell gasoline, I'm smelling something far better than that. So Liz and I, we went in, and all of a sudden we're like, yeah, we got to stop and get some brisket, you know, and there was all kinds of people there, and it was loud, but it was full of life. And I've always kind of had that picture as I started to read through this. It was this, you know, outside of this tent, everyone else had their life. They had their animals, they had their family, they're all their cares. They're defending from the wild animals, and you know, you still got to make your clothes. And if you're a potter, you're making your pottery. You're doing your work. There's all that. But whenever you come here,
My kind of truck stuff.
your kind of truck stuff. You know, when you come to Tabernacle, it was meant to be something different. And I hope that that's what coming to church becomes like. That we're coming to see our family, we're happy to be here, we're excited to be here, we're seeing people we love and enjoy being around. We're going to encounter God, and who knows what God's going to do, but that's why I've always said I think the number one committee in every church should be the hospitality team. Because we should always be eating and fellowshipping. Not that I need to gain any more weight, but just this notion of feasting together.
Spending a day together.
Yeah, not just last one in and the first one out. But this notion of wanting to linger, wanting to be in what else is there. Probably ought to finish the chapter. We got 5 minutes. 36, 37. You shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent of blue and purple and scarlet yarn and fine twined linen, embroidered with needlework. And you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, and you shall cast 5 bases of bronze for them. Same kind of themes, right? Keep the flies out. Keep the flies out.
Only the bases are bronze on them.
The screen's bases are bronze, yeah. Bronze wouldn't tarnish like silver does. But any thoughts? When we start to put the altar on next week and we get all the other pieces, it's just, I don't know. Every time when I first read it, I was like, this does not seem like anything I want to go to. And then as I started studying it and reading the culture of what God wants to do with it, and all of a sudden you start to get this notion, wait a second, this isn't about an angry God who's saying, no, you need to be made right and before you come to me. This is about a God who's saying, no, come to me and I will make you right. Come to me and you will be a part of my family. Come to me and I will provide. But just come. It's kind of like I say after every service where we're going to have a pitch in afterwards. I say, even if you didn't bring anything, I'm sure we'll have enough. Any other final thoughts? Let's pray. God, I thank you that you want us to come. That you want us to pay attention to the smallest of details. Because, Lord, you want us to feel welcomed and safe. And Lord, you want us to experience beauty. Lord, I pray that we would do the same in our lives, that we would pay attention to the details. We'd pay attention to the things that make us safe. We pay attention to the beauty that's around us. And Lord, that we would share those things with the people who most need them. May you be glorified in us as we go our separate ways and bring your kingdom here on earth. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So just a reminder, we will meet next week, but the week after that, we'll take a break. And then go from there. Thank you guys very much.
FYI, you can get online and get Rudy's barbecue sauce online.
So we told Keith about it, and he apparently ran into one out west. So when I went down to Texas the last time, I got a bottle of butter, and I've been savoring that. So I may just have to use that on my brisket.
Oh, yeah.
She put it on our.
Not the
Rub.
Oh, the barbecue. Oh.
the top, brown sugar, mustard.
Melissa, where did you get Rudy's rub on the brisket?
You know where I stand.